Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Beha'alotcha. And in many ways, Parashat Beha'alotcha is really the heart of Sefer Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. Even though it's only the third Torah portion into the book, and there are many more to come, the themes that are represented in this Torah portion are really the core of the experience of the generation of the desert. And don't forget, this parsha is most demonstrative of the nature, characteristics of that incredible time in the history of the Jewish people, because this parsha is still taking place before the Gezerah, before the decree was made, which is going to be very soon in Parashat Shalach, that indeed this generation will not be going into the land of Israel. So, as we stand right now, we are still about to go into the land. This is that generation full of promise, full of potential. There's so much going on in this Torah portion. There's the movement of the camp. There's the trumpets. There are so many things. But I'd like to focus on this generation that we talk about so much. Dor Hadeah, Dor Hamidbar. The generation of the desert is called the generation of knowledge. And nobody ever did it better. This generation is considered to be just so amazing, so holy. They had such incredible achievements spiritually. They were a group of people that it could really be said, and our sages do in fact say it, that no group, no single generation has ever been as close to the mark as these people were. This is the generation that was taken out from Egypt by God himself, the generation that came to Sinai and experienced the revelation, the generation that was fed the manna in the desert. And that was such an exacting discipline. It was a test constantly, the eating of the manna. There's so much about this generation that defies our understanding because they were so full of extremes and contradictions. They were absolutely masterful spiritually. They were so removed from the foibles of this world. They were so close to God. On the other hand, they were doomed to failure. And indeed, ultimately, as we're going to be experiencing in Parashat Shalach, they rose to their potential and plummeted dismally, so that it's so enigmatic to understand what this generation is really all about. And since the Torah is our life story, and it's all about us, and it's all about massive, cosmic, life-changing lessons that we have to be able to appreciate and discern for our time, we have to look at the mistakes of that generation and their greatness, and we see ourselves. We see the story of our own potential. It's not over yet. Our story hasn't yet been completed, so we hope to be the generation to fix all of these foibles. But certainly, if we take this generation as an archetype, then what does the generation really represent? The extremes of human possibility. Because since no group saw more, no group knew more, no group experienced more as a body, they knew God. They, simply put, embody the range of possibilities between extreme achievement and extreme failure. And the beauty of the whole thing about humanity in a Torah mindset, which is what we hope to have from studying the Torah and from being part of the Torah, the main thing that the Torah is constantly teaching us is that the human condition is limited, but despite the human condition, what a person can become, that is the beauty and the greatness of why Hashem gave the Torah to us and didn't leave it in heaven with the angels. Because a person can strive to change and master and overcome the inadequacies that are inherent within human makeup. And the generation of the desert, called the generation of knowledge, came so close to doing that. So, in addition to all the other themes that are going on in this Torah portion, the heart, I want to call it, of the book of Numbers, one thing that we can really learn from this Torah portion is a lesson in extreme personalities. So it's all about the continuing mystery of human nature. And the generation of the desert teaches us a lot about human nature. But what if, as we know, everything in the Torah means what it means, but it also means so much more. We can also go so much deeper. So, at the beginning of chapter 11, we have the rabble. The rabble is the asafsuf. This is the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude who came up from Egypt together with the children of Israel. And the rabble that was among them cultivated a craving. That means they taught themselves to crave. It was not a natural craving. It was a fabricated craving. And they gave this over to the children of Israel. And the children of Israel also wept once more. And they said, "Who will feed us meat? We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt, free of charge, cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now our life is parched. There is nothing. We have nothing to look forward to but the manna." So what's up with this? What is the deal with this sudden craving for meat? They remember that they ate free fish and all of these delicious things, cucumbers, melons, onions, leek, and garlic in Egypt. And it all seems very, very bizarre. First of all, we have a teaching, which is extremely important for many spiritual reasons. We know that the manna tasted like anything that a person wanted. And second of all, we know from various verses that we've been learning that when the children of Israel came up from Egypt, they had many flock with them, many herds. If they wanted meat, they could have had it. So what is the explanation for this sudden, uncontrollable, almost pathetic, certainly pathos-laden lust for meat, especially if they could taste anything in the manna? So it's like, I want a different taste, man. So the manna tasted like that, but of course it was manna, so maybe it's like, I want a different texture in my life, but is that really something to cry over? They're being spoon-fed from the Almighty's table, the most incredibly exacting spiritual diet that any human being could possibly experience. How could this be something to cry over, to the extent that to say that my life is parched and I have nothing to look forward to because I don't have any meat? So actually, and this is very deep, since we know that they did not receive free food in Egypt, and we know that the manna could taste like anything, and that they had huge flocks with them, our sages teach us that there's something else entirely going on here, and that this is just an excuse. And the meat that they ate, the fish that they ate for free in Egypt, is an allusion to the freedom that they had as far as their lack of accountability, their lack of responsibility. In short, they were free to be me. And this is all about me. That's what's going on here. This is a primal, cosmic me issue and me moment. And the whole kind of trumped up charge about the meat is an excuse. And actually, our sages teach us that this is about something else altogether, because as we read here, Moshe heard the people weeping in their family groups, each one at the entrance to his tent. So the secret here is that this whole lust for meat is actually a euphemism for rules of sexual conduct. And the people were really bemoaning their lack of freedom in their ability to marry whoever they wanted in certain interfamily relationships, because after all, they just received this new set of rules from Sinai. And so this was actually at the instigation of the evil mixed multitude that was in their midst, who sought and continue to seek throughout the ages to unravel the moral fiber of Israel through this perspective of their narrow and boring diet. They were able to somehow get into their consciousness these feelings of self-pity and regret over the limitations that they were experiencing in other areas as well. And so this whole incident is significant of one way of looking at things. I'm here, I'm in the center, I create my own life, and it's about what my comforts are and what I want. And that's all that it's all about. You could see it that way. It's all about the self. And then we can compare this to another extreme that exists here in our parsha. And again, there is so much going on here on so many levels. And even in this incident of the lust for the meat, there are so many other ways of understanding it as well. And I just want to state that we're not limited here, and I don't want to limit and say that this is the only way of understanding this, but we have to start somewhere. And this is a basic life lesson that we do learn from this incident, how this was just a cynical manipulation in order to make a point, and the point was a point of extreme hedonism. But then we have another extreme, which actually occurs earlier in the parsha, but since there's no chronological order in the Torah, I'm not taking any either in this particular sitting. Earlier in the parsha, we had the experience of the second Passover offering. The second Passover offering is a very unusual and unprecedented event in the Torah. And it's a very beautiful idea. These people who came forward to Moshe and said that they had been contaminated. This is tumat mit. It's a issue of halacha that they had been contaminated by contact with a human corpse, and therefore they were not able to make the Pesach offering on the appointed day, which of course was the 14th of Nisan. So they approached Moshe and Aaron on that day. And this is the first time in Torah that we have an initiative coming from the people. An initiative that expresses a desire to do Hashem's bidding and to be included in the grand scheme of Hashem's plan for the Jewish people. And those men said to Moshe, "We are contaminated through a human corpse. Why should we be diminished by not offering Hashem's offering in its appointed time among the children of Israel? Why should we be diminished? Why should we be lacking? Why should we be left out?" So their feeling of being diminished was not because of the lack of a certain taste in their mouths or a certain texture or what those things actually stand for. In a metaphor, their feeling of being diminished was, I'm not doing enough for Hashem. I'm not able to fulfill what it is that He wanted. And there's something going on here also on a very major level. Their whole point was, I don't want to be left out. Where do I fit in? Because everything that the Korban Pesach represents is so imperative to Jewish identity. Because this is what we do, and we've spoken about this at length. The idea that the Passover offering represents the very essential identity, the essence of what it means to be a Jew in this world. It's about obeying Hashem. It's about confronting the world's comfort zone of idolatry and slaughtering it mercilessly and fearlessly. And their whole point was, and as we'll see, they were involved in a mitzvah. They were already occupied with a mitzvah which inadvertently rendered them impure. So their whole point was, it can't be too late for us also to participate in that program of smashing idolatry and slaughtering it and fulfilling our part in Hashem's plan. And even on the level of appreciating the machloket, the disagreement of opinions about how it was that these people reached this state of impurity in the first place, there is here the deepest, most profound life lesson about what was the reason for their impurity in the first place. And first of all, we recall this whole elusive concept, impurity from exposure to death, is caused by the illusion that death causes in the first place, which is thinking that it's over, because it's really never over. The job is never finished, and if we think it's finished, that in itself brings about this state of disconnect, of impurity. But in any event, this is the reality. Halachically speaking, that if a person is exposed to death, then they are rendered impure until that impurity is able to be lifted through the process that is involved. So how did they get to this point that they missed Passover in time because they were impure? And again, until now, there was no such concept in the Torah that you could make up something like Passover, which is an appointed time that Hashem appointed in a specific date. So one opinion of our sages is that they were impure because they had been dealing with the burial of Nadav and Avihu, and that because they were occupied with their preparations, they had been rendered impure. And we recall, of course, from Parashat Shmini in the book of Vayikra that Nadav and Avihu had been punished for actually a personal initiative. They had brought a strange fire before Hashem. They were motivated from the highest feelings of wanting in holiness to always feel this way, to always feel so high, so close to Hashem. But we know that they were a bit too much for themselves, although holy. Their thing was, I always want to feel this way. I always want to feel this close to Hashem. And unfortunately, we know that this was their mistake, because yes, we always want to feel close to Hashem, we always want to have this high, but it has to come through natural means, and it has to come through the progression that Hashem allows us, and that makes sense for us, for who we are at all times. But look how beautiful this idea is. That these men who had been impure because they were selflessly dealing with the bodies of Nadav and Avihu, who themselves represent an excess of misguided personal initiative, they were rewarded with the Torah's main lesson par excellence in personal initiative. Because the whole idea of the Pesach Sheni, a whole novel idea in the Torah, is that here a new reality was created by the Jewish people themselves. They approached Moshe and they said, this won't do. We can't be left out. It can't be too late for us. Some accommodation for us has to be made. And Moshe, who was able to experience prophecy on demand, said, wait here and I'll find out. And Moshe immediately came back to them and he was told, yes, the people are right. And Hashem accepted their initiative. And in a way, it's a beautiful example of measure for measure. That they were dealing with the negative side of the personal initiative that was holy but misguided and absolutely out of place of Nadav and Avihu. And they were rewarded with the unprecedented example of personal initiative for Hashem, which is an expression of our idea, and we're not limited here, but it's for Hashem. It's not about me. And so the Torah teaches us there's definitely room here for the self. Even a celebration of the self in Hashem's world. And that is the most beautiful definition of Pesach Sheni, of the second Passover. It's a celebration of the self, of personal initiative, when it is totally uplifted and plugged in for Hashem's needs and for Hashem's program. And of course, every level of Torah interpretation is so holy, and it comes from Mount Sinai and is part of that uninterrupted tradition. And as the Talmud states, these and these are the words of the living God. So when we have a machloket, when we have a split of opinion, with one school of thought maintaining one idea and another a variant idea, the Talmud emphasizes both are true on some level, because there's something here for us. So we have that one school of thought that teaches that the reason for the impurity of those who came forward and requested the second Passover was because they had been dealing with Nadav and Avihu, and we explain on a very beautiful level what that represents. It's measure for measure. It's this for that. It's personal initiative that went haywire, repaid with personal initiative that leaves so much room for individuality and for the fulfillment of our dreams when those dreams are for Hashem. But then there's another opinion about what it was that had rendered those men who approached Moshe and requested another opportunity for Pesach, what had rendered them impure. And that opinion is that they were the ones that had been carrying the bones of Yosef. Because since the exodus from Egypt, the bones of Joseph accompanied the children of Israel, and there is a question about exactly who was consistently dealing with those bones. In fact, on this point, there is actually a midrash that states quite clearly the following statement, that the second Passover, Pesach Sheni, is in the merit of Yosef. Why? Because it never would have happened were it not for the fact that there was a group of people that had been rendered impure because they were dealing with Yosef HaTzadik, with the righteous Joseph. So on account of Yosef, we have Pesach Sheni. And who was Yosef? Yosef, who was ultimately absolutely selfless, who provided for his brethren in Egypt, who was the forerunner of the exile of Israel into Egypt, who went there first and prepared the way for them, he was always on the edge. And he represents purity, because he always remained pure despite the tests that he received. And so the ultimate answer and the very diametric opposition to the true motivation of the meat cravers is the character of Yosef. And if the one group who were led to express themselves in this lust for meat represent this unbridled self, Yosef represents not, as they do, what's in it for me, but why am I here? What is my part to play? And this is one of the greatest and most profound lessons of the generation of the desert as we prepare to enter into the land of Israel, as we attempt year after year to get to the bottom of all of this, to be the rectification of all the generations, and to truly rise up to the calling of the destiny of all of Israel. And we learn from the pitfalls, from the greatness, as well as from the foibles of the generation of the desert. And we see these extremes, and we say to ourselves, what is our perspective going to be? The world is about me, what's in it for me? Or why am I here? And what part do I have to play in the continuing story that we are still writing of the redemption of Israel, leading to the redemption of all the world?